On this computer. Ah, it looks like we're recording. Thank you for the reminder. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Valerie Rochon. Hi, Barbara. Thank you for waving. I'm with the Chamber Collaborative. For those that don't know me, thank you so much for joining us today. So usually we have Ben and Jen on our staff on this call, but today is the end of the 37th annual Chamber Golf Tournament. And they're out there in the sunshine at the Breakfast Hill Country Club. So it's all me, and I am not a Zoom expert. I'll be the first one to tell you that. So if I'm doing something incorrectly, if you need me to do something, just raise your hand and tell me that I'm doing something. The fact that I have it recording is a big accomplishment. I'm pretty pleased with myself so far. So help me out if you will. Welcome to everybody. We had quite a few people sign up to join us today, and it's a very important subject. The whole idea of HVAC is a very important subject for us all as we look at the weather, and we all know we have to move indoors. So just a little bit of housekeeping. While you're all on mute, if you have a question, please put it into the chat function. There'll be times that I'll read the chat questions, and there'll be times that I'll ask you to unmute yourselves and just ask the question yourself. If we get hijacked, because that can happen on Zoom, I'll just close the meeting down immediately and we'll reschedule it. All Chamber Chat live events are recorded and will be posted on our social and on our website next week. So today we are going to welcome James Petersen of Petersen Engineering and Ryan Houghton of the Dowling Corporation. Did I do that right, Ryan? Yeah. Houghton, okay. To tell us about the increasingly important world of heat, ventilation, and air conditioning. And there's a /R that James is going to tell you about. Just a little bit of chamber news before we get started. We canceled our last chat. Typically we do the second and fourth Fridays of the month. We canceled our last chat on the 25th because it conflicted with preparations for our annual summer awards ceremony, and fundraiser typically called Street Life. This year, Stream Life, because we had a lot of fun on the Remo platform. And once again, I want to congratulate the award winners for this year, for 2020. Our small but mighty business of the year was the Seacoast Rep. Our large business of the year was the AC Hotel. Our volunteer is Becky Cates from the Crumple Center. And our collaborator is Susan Gold of Gold and Partners. And our Pandemic Powerhouse Award went to the City of Portsmouth, City Manager Karen Conrad, and all the city staff and all the great work that they've been doing. That includes the task force of which James is the co-chair. As I said, today is the 37th annual golf tournament. Breakfast Hill Country Club presenting sponsor, Wheelabrated Technologies. If you're here, you're not there, and I'm sorry you're missing out on that sunshiny day. It was gorgeous out there this morning when we did the ready, set, go to get everybody off in their golf carts. Reminder that you should be following us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, because you're missing a lot of good stuff if you're not. I'm going to give a quick update on the Citizens Response Task Force. So the Public Realm Subcommittee is switching gears to look ahead to fall and winter. We are trying to help our restaurants stay open and outside a little bit longer. We just facilitated the purchase and delivery of 70 gas patio heaters that we bought in bulk, and they're becoming a little more scarce. We also I just picked up 142 blankets over at Blue Dolphin over in Somersworth for many of our restaurants to be handing out while people are sitting under the heaters outside dining. And now we're looking at plexiglass and acrylic barriers. The Bridge Street Lot Subcommittee reports that Pop-Up New Hampshire's last performance is next Sunday, the 18th. If you haven't already been outside to see what they're doing, they have done an amazing job. You need to get out there and see them. Visit popupnewhampshire.org for the schedule and to purchase tickets. James, I hope, is going to give us a little bit of update on the health subcommittee. He's going to be discussing some of the good work that they're doing. I want to announce a new program that the Chamber is launching. It's called Network Express, and it's speed dating. It's speed networking where you hop from table to table every 3 minutes to make new connections or make new friends. And that's on the Remo platform. If you haven't tried the Remo platform, it's a little different than Zoom. It's a great deal of fun. So please join us for that. The first one starts Thursday, October 22nd at noon. And you can go to portsmouthcollaborative.org to our events and sign up for that. We know we're having some staffing issues. Everybody's having staffing issues. We have a jobs board. Keep putting your jobs up on that jobs board. So we know that folks are looking at it. So whatever we can do to get you staff, we're trying. So we're going to start with our panelists, and I want to remind you that we're going to let James speak first, and then Ryan, and then we'll open it up for Q&A after that, unless it's a particular question that we need to ask right away. But for the most part, we'll just let them speak, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. This is always an interactive discussion. This is intended to be really a discussion, informal. So we want your questions. We want to hear what you're thinking. There's a really diverse group of people on this call, and yet everybody has the same concerns about moving indoors and making it safe. So let's ask questions as we go through that. So here we are. James Petersen began his career in building systems in 1986 and founded Petersen Engineering in 1992. He's always had a passion for energy efficiency and is an industry leader in advancing sustainability, occupant health and comfort, resiliency, simplicity, and affordable solutions in the built environment. By long ago adopting a holistic philosophy for the design of buildings, James leads and collaborates with project teams to optimize the integration of, this one you're going to have to explain, James, MEP-FP systems with architecture, sites, building enclosures, and building science fundamentals. The results are durable, simple, and affordable buildings that are leading the way towards a zero carbon future. Yay. James is a licensed professional engineer in 7 states and DC. He received a BS in mechanical engineering and a BA from philosophy from UNH. Thank you, James, for joining us today.
Thank you, Valerie. So welcome, everyone. I see a lot of familiar faces, and then some new names and new faces. So first, I'll start with MEP-FP. Those acronyms, when you're speaking within the industry, everybody knows them and they become super familiar. But in our case, for you to know, MEP-FP is mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, basically all the systems in a building. They're the systems that have a lot of moving parts and break a lot, unfortunately. So just a little bit more about us. We're a Portsmouth-based consulting firm. We design those MEP-FP systems for buildings. We have 23 employees. Many of us are licensed professional engineers. Most of our projects are in Massachusetts, primarily in Boston. A lot of large affordable housing projects and other building types. I wear a few other hats. I am co-chair of the Citizen Response Task Force, which I'm glad to be part of that. I co-chair that with Mark Stebbins, and Valerie is one of our valued members. For those who don't know, the Citizen Response Task Force was established by the City Council, and we started our work in June of this year to help local businesses with respect to the pandemic and taking into account health concerns and what we could do to help businesses reopen at that time. We are authorized to do our work. We're a 19-member committee through the end of this year. We've self-configured ourselves into one committee that was concentrated on the pop-up venue for arts and restaurant and retail, although we never quite made it to the retail. Another group of us focused on opening up as many areas as possible to support restaurants and some retail in terms of using public parking spaces and in some cases streets. And then the third group is our health subcommittee, which is comprised of experienced health professionals and myself. I'm the oddball in that group. I knew that when we got into moving back inside that there was going to be interest in indoor air quality. So I'm part of that group. So we're in a transition period as a task force that folks are super concerned. We anticipated this with moving inside. And of course, all the time we're considering how to help businesses and help the public understand what they need. The pandemic is changing, so there's a lot of balls in motion. In terms of what we cover today, because we have a variety of people, and I assume a variety of interest here, Ryan and I spoke and thought we'd keep our comments brief in order to address what's on people's minds. I can start though by just saying from an engineering perspective, how I look at the pandemic and its impact on us from a ventilation standpoint. One thing to start with, I think, is understanding the basic difference between being outdoors and indoors. Everybody knows what outdoors is, but I think from a very fundamental standpoint, mostly what we want to accomplish when we're inside a building is that we're separate from the elements and we're protected from the elements. And so what we aspire to do with buildings is to create a controlled environment. With respect to the pandemic, we probably wish that environment was a little less controlled. So when we go into a building, we have much less air movement than we do outdoors, and we're at the limitation of whatever the indoor whatever ventilation the indoor environment is providing. But what I can tell you is that even in the best ventilated buildings, including say operating rooms, you have much less ventilation going on than you do when you're enjoying the outdoors. So within the realm of being indoors, there are things we can do. We'll never be as safe indoors as we are outdoors. The nature of the virus provides difficulties in that when somebody is contagious and they come inside a building, they're exhaling particles. And we don't, one of the unfortunate aspects of the virus is that many folks are asymptomatic, so they're not aware they're exhaling the virus particles, and that's really the problem. The pandemic this fall has been less severe than many people thought it would be when we all went back to school or went indoors as a result of weather changing. So I'm actually I feel pretty good about where we are right now. with the pandemic. I think with indoor, if I can focus on restaurants for a moment, with indoor occupancies, it's really the concern with indoors is people assembling, people that don't know each other inside a building. And with respect to restaurants, it's a particularly difficult challenge because in order to eat and drink, obviously, it's hard to wear a mask. You can't wear a mask. So it's that compounds things. Another thing that's unique to restaurants and bars is that it's often noisy and people have to speak loudly because there might be music or crowd noise, and that exacerbates the spread of the virus. There aren't too many people in New Hampshire with the virus based on the data, but like I said, you don't know who has it and who doesn't. And because I'll give you one example in restaurants where we do know where there's a contaminant and we control it. It's in the kitchen where we cook, and we put a hood over the cooking equipment and we contain the contaminant and we exhaust it outdoors. The problem with people is they move, so it's difficult to do that in the case of somebody who's contagious. And there are basically a few, and we can go through these in more detail. There's a few things we can do that I call low cost, no cost. And the first one is simply allowing more outdoor air and more circulation or more air changes than we previously would have had in an indoor environment. It might be leaving windows cracked or opened. As the weather gets colder, that will be harder to do. Different building types have different ventilation systems. So another thing that can be done is that you increase the amount of outside air that your HVAC system is providing, if that's possible. Another thing that you can do is increase the efficiency of the filters in your HVAC equipment. There's a happy medium in an existing system where you can increase the efficiency to a certain level without having a negative impact on the existing system, and that's a filter efficiency of MERV 13. But it's going to, again, depend on your circumstances. And then finally, standalone air cleaning or air purifying equipment. The difficulty with those pieces of equipment, however, is there's something called a capture velocity, which basically in lay terms means that you may have somebody who's exhaling the contaminant, but if the standalone air cleaner is not within the sphere of those particles, then it's going to have a limited benefit. But there is some benefit to air cleaners. You probably need more than one, depending on how much area you're trying to address. But those are some of the things in that order that we've been advising people to consider, and whether their space is amenable to any one of those. But the first being more outside air, and the last being the one I mentioned having to do with air purifiers. So I think I'll just stop there and leave time for questions and time for Ryan.
Thanks so much, James. And let's see. I am going to figure out how to remove the spotlight, maybe. Maybe not. You might be on the spotlight for this whole time, James. Anybody wants to help me? Speak up now. It appears that I can replace the spotlight. Oh, with someone else. Hi.
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm trying to. All right, we're back to James. We're gonna stay on you, James, until somebody tells me how to change it. Even though when I click on remove spotlight, it does not remove the spotlight. So anyhow, in the chat, you will see that I put the FAQ. Have him mute him. Okay. If you, in the chat, I put the link to the FAQs that James and the Health Subcommittee have developed.
Valerie,
Yes.
if you'd like me to speak about that for a minute, I can, and you can maybe phone a friend about your.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, go right ahead, James. Thank you.
All right.
Phone a friend. What a great idea.
So what Valerie is referring to is that, HVAC, well, the first question in our FAQ for ventilation is what does HVAC stand for? And in Ryan's case, what does HVACR stand for? So the reason why I'm laughing is that, no one has ever really cared about HVAC. I mean, and Ryan can speak to this too, is that the goal of HVAC is that people don't know about it, that they're comfortable and they just don't worry about it. And so it's weird to be part of an industry where your goal is to be anonymity. But the pandemic has changed that a little bit. So the FAQ, part of what we're trying to do with the FAQ, frequently asked questions around ventilation, is just to give people a understanding of the terms. There's been more press on HVAC, and so the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, we're starting to see articles in major publications helping people understand the relative risks and the role of ventilation. So part of what we've done in the FAQs is just to basically provide definition of terms that you might be hearing, and they allow you to hopefully speak more readily with someone like Ryan or myself, and help us or people like us address your particular circumstance. And then the other part of the FAQ on ventilation is there's a section dedicated to commercial applications and a section dedicated to residences, and even getting into, what if I have the virus? What do I do with respect to isolation relative to my HVAC system in my home to protect others that might be living in the home as well.
Can you put that back?
Everybody, hear everybody? No.
So you're on mute, Valerie, at the moment.
Thanks, James. I've just put the link back in the chat again. Can people see it?
No,
It says from me to everyone, and that's not working.
no.
So I will email it out to everybody after this chat.
Yeah, I do see that link in my chat, at least, Valerie.
You do?
I saw it for a moment, but it's gone.
It's the
Well, my apologies. It says that it went to everyone, so let me try it again, doing it a different way here. My apologies.
If you scroll down to the bottom taskbar and actually pull up the chat window,
Yes.
it will pull up on the right-hand side. You can leave the chat marquee up the whole time.
Yes, I can see it. It's in my chat.
Yeah, okay.
And so Valerie, with respect to Ryan, when he speaks, he takes up the whole screen. So you might be good in terms of your IT issue there.
I see it now. See it.
Oh, good, great, thank you. So are you telling me, James, that when any of us speak, that goes into full screen speaker view?
Yeah, on my computer, that's what's happening.
That what's happening? Well, cool, that's what's not happening on my screen, but if that's what's happening, we're good. So I just want to announce and thank Councillor Lazenby and Councillor Huda for joining us today before I introduce Ryan. So Ryan Houghton is Operations Manager at Dowling Corporation, an HVAC/R mechanical company, serving clients across the seacoast, southern Maine, and the North Shore of Massachusetts since 1961. Ryan began his career at Dowling in 2005 as a service technician, and working in a variety of positions has led him to his current role, providing leadership to all administrative operations across the company. Ryan is a graduate of Great Bay Community College and Leadership Seacoast. That's great to hear. He has served as past chair of Catapult Seacoast and is currently on the admissions committee of Leadership Seacoast. He resides in Stratham with his wife and daughter. The recent COVID environment has grabbed our attention and focused us on opportunities to learn more about indoor air quality and HVAC systems, Ryan says. He's been working closely with many local businesses and residents, and he looks forward to sharing some of the learning and experiences with you all today. So, Ryan, thank you for being here.
Yes, excellent, Valerie. Thank you so much for having me, and it's a pleasure to meet everyone today. So glad you all could join us. Yeah, we certainly have noticed an increase in number of calls and inquiries and things we're getting as it relates to what maybe changes or modifications people can make to their HVAC systems to just help them feel a little more comfortable with being inside, whether it's their home or their business, or also getting customers and patrons to be coming back into their businesses as well. So we've been fortunate to have this experience across a wide breadth of businesses and clients, hospitals, other medical facilities, restaurants, municipal buildings, and it's offered some good opportunities to really research and understand the continued evolution of our market, and now as it relates particularly to indoor air quality. As James mentioned, and I almost think he was reading my list in order as well, but we focus on many of those same things in that order. As he was talking, the dynamic between outside and inside, how do we make that line a little thinner, and get more outside air in, understanding where we are, though that comes with a cost. As the weather gets colder, the more cold air you bring in, you got to pay to heat it. So we got to be cognizant of those things when we're making best decisions for the business owner or homeowner. Filtration, and then lastly, some other means of cleaning up the air, whether it's a UV light, an air purifier, or something to they call a ionizer, which kind of helps to purify air and make particles a little bit bigger, so your filter picks up more of them. Portsmouth, it presents some challenges in such that you've got a lot of fixed infrastructure that's in locations that it's difficult to move or access in some cases. So you really kind of have to take them on a case-by-case basis, and see what means you have to affect the system design or layout. What access do you have to the building's infrastructure? What means of egress do you have to try and introduce fresh air if it doesn't already exist in the current application or system setup? And then, ultimately what costs are associated with these, and just really kind of work through a practical approach and make sure everybody understands. So as they go to make a decision, they're doing so informed. And they bring many of the information they have received to date to the consultations that we have, and we work through all those great questions and get to a place to where we're comfortable with moving forward and making everybody else comfortable and being a part of our business. So, And unfortunately, there's not a magic wand we can wave or a particular sticker we can put in a window, but we can certainly work hard to help educate people so that way they can, you know, be more comfortable and informed.
Thank you, Ryan. And I have a couple of questions. I know that we've spoken with some folks about UV light and the ionizer. There's some upsides and downsides to those, like the UV light, correct me if I'm wrong, but certainly give us more information on it. It needs to be away from people. You can't have UV light around people, right? So what if you wanted to, what does that look like? If you wanted to install UV lighting, what do you have to think about?
Yeah, those are things that are going to go either in your system in the equipment itself, or sometimes they'll go in the airstream and the duct. And as James mentioned, those are kind of your surface capture. You know, they're going to get anything that gets up into your airstream or passes through the surface where the UV light is hitting. You know, so you have to be cognizant of how the system is set up. You know, in addition, you don't want to get them too close to like an air filter or anything like that, because the light will have a negative impact on that. The other factor with those is a little bit higher cost in the initial onset. And also you have a maintenance cost that goes in with those, and that you have to replace the bulbs in some cases annually or every other year to be able to continue to get the benefit that those offer. So it's not something that we you know, focus on first and foremost, but you know, when the question does come up, you know, we just have to take a look at the system and kind of see what product would be the best fit, because they make so many different UV light products now, from ones that, you know, can hang on a ceiling or wall right in the room and they're encapsulated in a box and out of the way, to ones that, like I said, would go inside of your mechanical system itself, whether it's up on the roof or in your closet or basement or what have you.
Thank you. Is an ionizer similar to that, or?
It is. They're all air purification products, so they're similar from that aspect. The ionizer, what they're intended to do is they release negative ions, and then you get the particles or your particulates that are in the air that then these ions attract to and make them larger. So the larger particles, more of them are able to be picked up by your air filter. So, you know, at a base level, it makes your air filter more effective, but in combination with an increased MERV rating filter, you're really having a good impact on your air quality.
I'm not sure, but can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. The only reason I didn't mean to jump in, but if I thought you said you had two questions, and I thought therefore you'd ask them. But in the first place, by the way, I want to thank the Chamber for doing this. It's introduce myself. I'm Andy Livingston, and I'm representing the 1828 Pepperell Cove group, which is a group of 3 restaurants and a store and an event space. And because you're on ionization, I thought it'd be kind of, and by the way, James, hello, how are you? James and I have done some projects together. He's been trying to keep Andy. Yeah, keep us out of trouble. We have recently, about a month ago, installed needlepoint bipolar ionization systems in our entire campus. That includes the store and all of the indoor restaurants and areas. And I think, you guys all, everybody ought to take a look and look into it themselves. I've actually spent over 6 months talking to all of the manufacturers that I could and looking at all the test results. And I think that it's a very, very valuable thing, at least for restaurants and really pretty much anything. I think the schools, we offered to install them in the little Kittery school out here, the Mitchell, and the school department's never gotten back in touch with us. We were going to do it as a free favor for the community, and we may still if it comes to that. But just to give you an example, a needle nose bipolar, or just bipolar, but needle point ionization systems produce both positive and negative ions, which is, of course, exactly what nature's doing outdoors, as James mentioned. And it's one of the reasons you're much safer outside, as a rule, because there are ions all over the place. We're producing 400 million ions per cubic centimeter per second for each of our indoor spaces. So we have a system for each of the separate system for each of these spaces. Essentially what they're doing is we're building the density of the ions into the space so that they're so dramatically, they're I don't know how much more, how many more ions we have than nature outdoors, but it's a very, very substantial amount. And that essentially puts ions in virtually 100% of the space that the HVAC will, get to. And what these ions do, specifically for viruses, and specifically, by the way, for COVID-19, is they attach to the virus molecules. And the way I understand it, and I'm not a scientist by any stretch, but they essentially rob the virus of hydrogen, and that then disinfects the virus. It's no longer able to infect you, even if you took it in. And just to give you an example, we have had it for a month. We've had no issues of any that we know of. Patron, of course, you never know, because you could be in a wedding and walk out the door and catch it from someone else outside. But in terms of the staff, which I think is a little more impressive, none of the staff have been tested positive. They are very enthusiastic, I might add, just as a side note, that we have this, because one of the things you get into, you're always worried about the customer and that sort of thing. All of a sudden you realize, my God, we've got these people working in here who probably come to work every morning scared to death that they're going to wind up with this damn virus. I by the way, have had it. So, so I can tell you don't want it. But at any rate, so putting that many ions out there, as the CEO of Atmos Air, which is one of the foremost, we don't use them, we use someone else, but as the CEO of Atmos Air said, there are only two things that our ionizer can't make any effect at all on. And I said, okay, well, what are those? And he said, well, the first is the outdoors, because there's breezes and everything else. And so it'll always be, it'll disperse all these ions. And he said, the second is, we can't help it if you want to kiss someone. We're sunk. There's no air in between the two people for these ions to be residing, if you will, and killing before they get into the humans, into the people. So that's the other thing you can't let anybody do. I said, well, that's a little bit tough, but we'll certainly suggest it to our customers and our staff. And the other thing that's interesting too is that when you put the kind of density of ions out there that we do, the ions drop to if they haven't attached themselves to a virus or whatever, a bacterium or almost anything, but any particle, but they'll drop to the non-porous surfaces and disinfect those. So all the surfaces in these rooms are constantly, continuously being disinfected. Now, having said that,
excuse me. So, sorry, Ann, did you have a question for either James or Ryan?
Yeah, I want to know if they have had any real experience in any of that.
Okay, thank you, because we've got a number of other questions that I want to get to, so I want to make sure we have time for everybody.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much.
Tend to proselytize. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can briefly No, that's a good job, Andy, of describing that. I appreciate it. The, you know, in a pandemic, you try everything. We've spent a lot of time looking at ionization, and there's not a lot of independent research, but it looks promising, and it's one of those things that I think is worth a try. The ASHRAE, the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, Air Conditioning Engineers, still does, however, consider it emerging technology, even though it's been around for a long time. So I think out of this pandemic, we'll probably have a lot more interest in ionization and a lot more research done, and we'll know a lot more about it, about its efficacy. But I don't dispute anything you said.
Yeah, no, I think from the, you know, just from the field side, and we've primarily been dealing with filtration and ventilation. We've probably done, you know, a few dozen ionization projects across, you know, the customer base, but they haven't been quite as active as, you know, conversations about fresh air and what can I do to increase the MERV rating of my filters.
Okay, thank you, Ryan and James. We have a few more questions coming in here. So one is, if you keep the windows open, does that affect how your HVAC systems work? And is this detrimental in the long run? Which one of you wants to tackle that one first?
We probably both do. Why don't you go first, Ryan?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it definitely has an impact. I can't say that it's detrimental to your system, but you know, James touched on this kind of in his overview. Is you know, the goal is to kind of condition and control the environment inside the space. So the more you bring outside air, whether it's through mechanical means or a window, you're losing that control. So it does help to bring fresh air into the space, but you know, you also have to pay to heat it, you have to pay to cool it, and you got to filter it. So you know, all those things would all factor into keeping your windows open.
You know, what I'd add is, in most circumstances, your HVAC system can run at the same time that you have open windows. This is the first time in my life that I've been suggesting that people maybe use a little bit more energy this winter in order to keep your ventilation higher. The issue with HVAC systems is it's because of energy use and the cost of energy. They have in most cases a limited capacity to bring in outside air. And if you have a couple windows on opposing walls, there's a lot of capacity there for air exchange. And as we get colder, it's going to be hard to use windows. But this morning it was 37 degrees, and I still had my window cracked all night. And I think people just need to, you know, keep elevating their ventilation IQ and do the best they can to strike that balance between energy use and optimizing and maximizing ventilation.
That's a great statement, James, elevating our ventilation IQ, because as one of you said earlier, who thinks of HVAC? The folks that are doing it, but the rest of us just turn the switch. and yeah, we're not, that's not our lives. And so escalating our ventilation IQ is a good motto, I think, right now. A few more questions here. What about standalone UV lights? I'm not sure that I understand the question, but maybe you do, Ryan.
Well, I know, James, I know you had mentioned some standalone products, and I think I'd maybe defer to you on the product side. I mean, the ones I'm most familiar with would be an independent unit that isn't tied into your HVAC system. I've seen some products that you have kind of like a box, a module that would hang up on your wall or something, and it would be treating the air inside of that particular room, but it wouldn't be doing anything for any other rooms.
Right. So there's many, I mean, through a Google search, and I would suggest this, people can do their own research, but there are many manufacturers either already available or rushing to market. These basically standalone, which means that you can just plug them in to a standard outlet, and they usually are comprised of a HEPA filter and sometimes just a HEPA filter, which is a very efficient filter. And they may also include ionization or use of a UV light. And one application, for example, of one of those pieces of equipment where it could be effective would be in a single room where you maybe have someone who's recovering from the virus and you're looking to clean that air and prevent spread of the virus to, beyond that room. So you have to be particular about the amount of square footage that a standalone anything can cover. I think that's their greatest limitation, is that they can't take care of an entire building. It doesn't help to leave them running overnight. If you're a restaurant owner, your real threat is somebody walking in who's contagious, and how to essentially, and what I'll do is I'll qualify this first. I was going to say is essentially reduce the concentration of the virus, but the information that's available to us on how the virus spreads is still changing. But the basic premise of ventilation and of anything else we've discussed is that if you can reduce the concentration of the virus, you're going to reduce the how contagious it is. And that's really at the foundation of what we're talking about.
Thank you, James. We have another question. Does ozone have any effect on COVID?
Yeah, this is a little bit of a blemish for us, I believe. Ozone, some types of ionization produce ozone, which is O3. And it's not, ozone is a pollutant. I remember 10 years ago that there were people promoting ozone machines and didn't understand why. So it's not a good thing. So you want to be careful about as you do your shopping, if you're looking for a standalone unit, there is some equipment that is promoting ozone. And ozone production by ionization is not what I would recommend. They sometimes say it occurs outdoors, so implying that it must be good. Well, yeah, it does occur outdoors because there's, cars driving by. It's a pollutant, and so that's something to be avoided. Is equipment that produces ozone. It does have genuine applications that I've heard of, and I've heard it can be used to disinfect a building for a variety of reasons for why a building can become needing to have serious decontamination, but there's no people in the building when that's going on.
Thank you, James. Ryan, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that covers it. James covered just being conscious of, any products you're selecting and any byproducts they produce. So they do make ionizers that do not produce ozone.
So there's another good mantra as we're looking at all of these, be aware of byproducts. Thank you. Next question, what about an electrostatically charged and heated nickel filter?
Wow.
Do you know anything about that?
You want to go first, Ryan?
Thank you. I can't say. I mean, I've dealt with the electrostatically charged air cleaners. I think they my understanding of them is they work somewhat similar to an ionizer product. It's just a little bit different in its application, but I know I've seen some of those built in with a pre-filter element, and then you have the air cleaner piece with, and you know, they don't really look that much different than a filter cabinet, but I can't say, you know, pros of one versus the other.
Yeah, and I would second that. There's different terms, and they mean slightly different things, but electronic filter, and Ryan's explanation is that it is using the same basic physics of charge ions helping to filter out particles. And I've never heard of the nickel part of that question, but I'll look into it.
Thanks, James. Councillor Huda has a question for you.
Hey, hi, James. Hi, everybody. As everybody might know or might not know, the council has been asked to consider moving to a year-round outside. So my question for you, James, and I think this is the right venue to ask this. When we move, when we take an outdoor space, in the last meeting, Valerie was kind enough to provide us with 4 different types of spaces that we will be looking at in this. Basically, it's private property, parking lots, sidewalk cafes, and the public realm. So what I'm thinking of is private property with covers and parking lots where this is a possibility. So when we take an outdoor space and put a roof on it and cover it with, for the winter, with plastic sides to keep out the wind and the weather, we create kind of an indoor space. Is there a way to ventilate this space to make it usable, or would this automatically flip this to the indoor rules?
I think your intuition is correct that and this is why it's important for people to understand the fundamentals. If you take a outdoor space and you basically put a tent up with roof inside, you're basically creating an indoor space. So I think when we consider moving outdoors, we need to think about human comfort. So humans are comfortable when it's not windy, they're more comfortable. They're comfortable when it's sunny. You know, I've had the experience of sitting outside at Ceres Bakery. It's a south-facing wall with benches outside, and you can have it be quite cool, but you have the benefit of the sun's radiation, the benefit of the wind, the air not moving. On those days when you have sun but you have wind, you're not going to be comfortable. And you have the benefit of the asphalt street and the masonry behind you. And all those things contribute to allowing you to be comfortable outdoors. So I think we have to look at those fundamentals of spaces that have access to the sun, block you from the wind, maybe incorporate some sort of artificial radiant heat, like an open flame, or I visited a restaurant this week that had electric radiant panels in the ceiling and had a glass partition along the side, but the partition was open above and open below, and it was just the right combination where it allowed you to be outdoors, but address those fundamental things that make for human comfort. But enclosing people, if you were to take a tent that's enclosed, all you're doing is you're putting people indoors and they're also not comfortable. So it's something to work on.
Because my question would be, I've worked at Strawberry Bank when they have the baby animals, and they definitely have ventilation at that time when they have a tent like this. So would you even consider that as adequate, or?
If it's a tent where you're covered but the sides are open, I think you're good. I mean, that's closer to being outdoors than indoors. And I think what the other thing that humans can do is we can just dress differently. If we dress warmly, another experience I have personally is riding my bike throughout the winter to get to work. So people can think differently about what they can do with respect to their clothing in order to have an outdoor experience like the one you described at Strawberry Bank be enjoyable at colder temperatures. So the more people can make that adjustment, the more time they can be outside enjoying things and not be stuck at home.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Huda. We have time for, I think, one more question. And if I may, we received some questions beforehand from one of our businesses, a small inn. And he was asking what steps can be taken in the business that is basically a residential heating system and follows on with our standalone air cleaners useful. And I think you've pretty much addressed that part. But is there something, I think what he's asking is he's got a residential heating system. Is there something that he should be looking at to convert to a business level? What can he do to convert it to a business level for the air filtration and ventilation?
Ryan, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be the same things we've discussed, whether it's you know, a more of a residential style system. You know, it's just assessing the setup, the access, you know, and looking at the means to be able to bring in, you know, ventilation, get the maximum number of air changes. What do they have set up for filtration? And really the criteria is no different. It's just may not be on the scale of a commercial system.
Okay, thank you. I will share that with him. I think he's also expecting to look at this, to watch this recording, because there's so much information in this recording and I wouldn't want to try to relay that information. So Ryan, do you want to give us your email address that I'll put, hopefully shows up in the chat, so that if people have some questions for you and Dowling, they can ask you?
Yeah, I will put it up on the chat right now.
Thank you. James, would you be interested in doing that as well?
Yeah, I have to do that.
Thank you. We've got two people who live and breathe the HVAC world, and I think that they will become increasingly more important to us. Not that they weren't already, but that they will become increasingly more important to us as we get into the winter months and we have to really figure it out. So I cannot thank the two of you enough for being here. And I thank all of you who have joined us. We've had quite a great crowd here today, so we really appreciate you being here. If you have further questions, you have their email addresses. You have the link. Hopefully everybody has that link to the FAQs that James and the Health Subcommittee have put together. And so we thank you so much for that. We're going to wrap up here. It's 2 o'clock. And I just want to say that we have some next chats coming up. Our schedule used to be every Friday, and now we're doing the 2nd and 4th Fridays of the month. So the 4th Friday of October is October 23rd, when we are going to invite the 6 chambers from the Seacoast Chamber Alliance, who have recently been awarded about $300,000 from CARES Act funds through the partnership with the BEA. That will be spent between now and December 30th, which is when CARES Act funds have to be spent, in helping our small businesses during the recovery period. So setting us up for good recovery practices, et cetera. So the 6 chambers, of which we're one, will be sharing that with you. And also we are working right now as a little bonus. You know that we normally during election years, election periods, provide roundtable opportunities for our business community to sit and chat with candidates. Congressman Pappas and his and the Republican challenger Matt Mowers, we're working on bringing them in next Friday, the 16th. Just working out the time right now. Hopefully we can work that out. But the format will be just as it has been at Strawberry Bank Museum. If those of you who have joined us are participants, Our attendees will be seated in 2 separate rooms. The candidates will be seated in one or the other, and will answer your questions, talk with you about what your concerns are, and then at a certain time, we will move those 2 candidates into the opposite room so that you have an opportunity to speak one-on-one with Congressman Pappas and with Mr. Mowers as well. So we'll try to set that up for next Friday. So put that in your calendar in pencil so we can tell you what the time is. Reminder.
I just noticed on my email too, it only went back to you on the chat, Valerie, but it's just Ryan, R-Y-A-N, at dowlingcorp.com, where you can go to our website and reach us that way as well.
Okay, and it looks like James at Petersen, S-E-N, P-E-T-E-R-S-E-N, engineering.com. So thank you both for that. So after every chamber chat, we try to give you something inspiring or fun or funny or something at the end of our chats to walk away with for the weekend. And it being Columbus Day weekend, I'd like to share something with you. Indigenous Peoples Day has risen to prominence as a replacement for Columbus Day. And thanks to the students from Portsmouth High School's We Speak Social Justice Group, who presented a petition for the city to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day in place of Columbus Day, the City Council voted this week to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day this year alongside Columbus Day. In recent decades, the awareness that colonization by European nations spelled disaster for the indigenous peoples has led to almost all of these holidays being replaced by a Day of the Races, which focuses on celebrating the heritage and contribution to the Americas of those who are here before Columbus and, quite frankly, before all of us immigrants. So if it's possible for me to share my screen, I'm going to do that. And after that, we will close up. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Have a safe and happy holiday weekend, and stick around and watch this very quick video, assuming I can make it show up on the screen. Let's see if I can do that. Yeah, there it is.
Are you tired?
There you go. I think I stopped that. Now I just have to figure out how to stop sharing my screen, right? Not sure that I can do that. So I'm going to suggest that you all have a great weekend. And hopefully we'll see you next week for our roundtable. And again on the 23rd, so you can learn all about the partnership with the BEA. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you, Valerie.
Thanks, Val.